A reading from the first book of Kings. When Elijah reached Horeb, the mount of God, he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him. He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. Also you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, of Abel-Meholah, as prophet in your place." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I long to see your face, O Lord. I long to see your face, O Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. Come, my heart says, seek his face. I long to see your face, O Lord. Your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger, you who have been my help. I long to see your face, O Lord. I believe that I shall see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. I long to see your face, O Lord. Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. Shine on the world like bright stars. You are offering it the word of life. Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell." It was also said, "Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on grounds of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
Once again, Friday morning, ask Kevin to give us a reflection on today's readings. Kevin.
What we just heard in this morning's gospel is, for me, one of the scariest passages I would read when I was a kid. I mean, honestly, did Jesus actually say that we should tear out our eyes and cut off our hands? Well, obviously, no. I mean, but it's a fantastic image to show us the extreme length that we ought to go in order to try and root out sin in our lives. Ultimately, Jesus accomplishes this on the cross, and he gives us that opportunity to receive forgiveness of sins. But we, in our Catholic tradition, I would say we have a much gentler approach now. I mean, to seek forgiveness of sins through the sacrament of confession. But really, at the heart of this gospel, we have to try and put a lot of energy in finding out what the root is of our own personal sin and remove it from our lives. And in today's gospel, Jesus uses the example of adultery. And in this case, it's the infidelity in marriage that he's using. But he says that not doing that is not enough. Not committing adultery is not enough. But that even looking at someone lustfully, that's something on the inside, that also is considered adultery. We also have to root that out. And so at the root of that matrimonial infidelity is lustful thoughts. And both that and the matrimonial infidelity, those are both considered adultery, and both need to be taken out. So an example that comes into mind right now is anyone who has a lawn or anyone who's done any kind of landscaping knows this, that the roots are as much part of the plant or of a weed than the leaves and the stems. Many of us have been working outside of our garden, especially outside in our garden, especially this year, maybe a lot more this year, and think of having to pull out weeds. Nowadays, we're not really allowed to use pesticides, or I think we would call it herbicides in this case, in order to kill the weeds, so we have to do it manually. And so as I was at my mom's, I wasn't there this year, but last summer she has a tool that she bought at a garden center, and it actually has these prongs that you dig into the ground around the weed, and it pulls out the weed, the leaves and all that, and the roots. So if we don't pull out the roots, the weed is just going to come back. All right. So the gospel speaks today about adultery. But I think we can also relate this teaching of Jesus to what's been dominating the news over the past week, the death of George Floyd and the movement that has taken off and has actually replaced the headlines surrounding this COVID-19 pandemic. Some people are calling this event, this tragedy, like a catalyst, an igniter, a starter for change. And we are seeing some responses, some changes in policies in police departments and all of this. We can ask ourselves, are those changes going to be enough? Do they get to the root of the issue that we're facing in our society, that issue of discrimination and of racism? And I'm not sure. But I think getting there to that root of change, or that root that we need for change, it starts with each one of us. It starts from our own perspective that we have on each other and on the world. So here's a quote from St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. "From now on, therefore, we regard no one from a human point of view." So the question we need to ask ourselves is this: do we look at others from a worldly perspective or from God's perspective? It's about seeing others as God sees them. And in the case of lust, the other person is seen as something, an object to be possessed, something to be enjoyed. In the case of discrimination, it's showing favor or partiality to one group or over another, based on race, based on religion, based on ethnic background. But from God's perspective, we always have to be looking at somebody as a person. We are looking at a person, someone who loves, someone who is loved, someone with a family. It was truly heartbreaking yesterday, on Tuesday, when I saw on TV the funeral of George Floyd. He had a family, a network of relationships. The fact that this person is fearfully and wonderfully made in the image and likeness of God. That's the perspective we have to have. And that's what we should be reflecting on, all of us. We may not be ourselves committing acts of marriage infidelity or adultery or racism, or at least outright acts of those things. But the roots of those sins are inside of us. Today we can reflect on this question. Do we see others as God sees them? And ultimately, that's why Jesus suffered his passion and his death. Because he saw us in the way that the Father sees us. As the Father has loved me, so I loved you. And that perspective changed the entire course of history and the fate of all of humanity.